listening to Transcaster Radio, a podcast about trans life and all that goes along with it. You can listen to the show anywhere you enjoy podcasts, and we'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review. It helps us reach more people, and we greatly appreciate it. Now, here's your host, Caden Taylor.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Transcaster Radio. I have a great interview for you today. I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Hello, my name is Kayla.
And tell us a little bit about yourself, Kayla.
Let's see, 35 years old. I am a combat vet, trans woman. I'm not really good at these open-ended questions.
I'm not very good at them either. All right, so today we're going to talk about Trump's wonderful trans military ban.
Oh boy.
So we'll get a little into, let's start with, you're a retired Army sergeant, so let's get a little into, were you serving in the Army when you discovered you were trans?
That's kind of complicated. It took me a whole lot of years to really even let myself figure out what I even was. The signs were there since I was at least 14.
Yeah.
But I grew up in the 90s. You know how bad it was in the 90s for anyone who was trans but didn't know it?
Yeah.
There was nothing to go off of except for that's a man jokes. So it's you don't your mind doesn't even want to go with the idea that, hey, I'm that.
Yeah.
So when I enlisted at 20, I knew, but I didn't know, and I didn't let myself actually make that step.
Yeah.
And so I didn't actually really figure myself out, ask myself the hard questions, and really understand truly what I was, and let myself internalize that until starting in my late 20s.
Okay, that's it's actually interesting because that's how it was with me. I had not known what transgender was, and I came out as a lesbian when I was 15, but I obviously knew something was different, but I didn't have a word, to define it. And so it was when I was 20 that I actually knew what transgender was and said, I think this is who I am. But it took me 10 years to come to terms with it on my own and come out when I was 30. So I know exactly how that feels.
Repression's a hell of a drug.
Yeah, it is. So obviously you didn't come out while you were in the Army. So would you have felt safe at all while you were in the military coming out?
No.
Would you?
Not at the time I served.
Would you feel safe today?
I would have said yes if this was 2 years ago.
Okay.
But nowadays?
Yeah, with everything going on.
Yeah, I'm sure we can get into the nuts and bolts of that
sure.
in a bit.
Was the trans community even talked about while you were in the military? I can't remember. Was the gay ban still in effect then?
Don't ask, don't tell?
Yeah, don't ask, don't
tell.
I
was in for the last few years of DADT.
Okay.
And trans people as in the way that you and I think of the notion wasn't really even on the radar. There was no such talk about trans people serving in the military. It just wasn't even really a thing. The thing that was talked about was gays serving openly.
Yeah.
But the only time that trans people were referred to was generally in a very, very transphobic way, and I'm sure you can already guess where this is going. Ha! You're looking at tranny porn, that kind of shit.
Yeah.
So Yeah.
And it's got to be harder as a trans woman. I know just from I can only know from my experience as a trans man, but and I don't mean that we don't both go through difficult times, but in the essence of the fact that um when people think of the trans community, they think of the trans woman because it's been so popularized in media and things like that, that, oh, it's a man. And that I think when people generally think of the trans community, they think of trans women. They don't think of trans men.
And you know what? That pisses me off because you all have stories to tell too, and everyone's too busy being focused on us, freaking out about the men in the dresses. It's bullshit. Come on, you guys get erased needlessly. It sucks.
Yeah, it does. It does. All right. So what are your thoughts on the Trump military trans ban that went into effect on the 12th? Considering it was 3 years after Obama told trans military personnel they could serve openly and have gender affirming medical and psychological care.
All right. So how it's probably received by most of the people who are already serving. There's a term that we all get acquainted with in the military, set up for failure.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, and the meaning is pretty self-evident. You were told to do a thing, but you were just not given the ability to actually do the thing. You were just destined to fail from the very start and you didn't even know it. That's probably what this felt like for so many of them.
Yeah.
They came out in good faith, being assured that their chain of command would look out for them, would make sure they still were able to serve as members of their unit, because that's what all of us ever want to do. Is we just want to do our job and not be screwed with. I mean, that's just how it is. And so there's a certain dynamic in most military units, is that the unit becomes your family.
Okay.
So your platoon's your immediate family, your company's your extended family. These are the people you serve with every day. It's not just a job. So for someone to come out like that to their unit, say, I am trans. I am going to be transitioning from this standard to the other standard. So that right there by itself takes so much courage. I couldn't imagine doing that with any of the units I was ever with.
Really?
So yeah. And so it means a lot to get acceptance within that unit, because those are your brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
So these people, these service members, they came out to their basically a second family, and only a few short years later get told, oh, the faith that you just put in us to watch your back, because that's how we work. We all watch each other's backs. We're gonna have to throw you under the bus now. It's whether we like it or not. It's the regs.
What do you think Trump's, I don't know, purpose? I mean, what do you think his goal is? Is just to shun the LGBTQ community? I mean, it's not just trans people that he's going after. I mean, we all know that. But right now, the highlight of everything in the LGBTQ community is the trans military ban. So, I mean, I watched the elections and I watched him, talk his talk, and he gained all these followers, and it honestly scares me because he scares me, but the amount of people that followed him to elect him is even scarier. And he talked a lot about supporting the LGBT community, and then that fell off the face of the planet.
Yep.
So I think he's, with the whole Trump military ban, he wants to negate a whole population of people. I think he wants to act like we don't exist and try to push us out. Because I don't know. I mean, I wasn't in the military. I will tell you, I signed up to go to the military. I had my job. I had my day to leave to go into boot camp. And I was 17 and I got really, really sick. And I was in the hospital and I ended up not being able to go the day I was supposed to go into basic training. And I actually petitioned to the state and our Senate to allow me to go in, but because it was for a medical reason, that's the reason why I didn't leave that day, they would never allow me to go into the military. But it was always something I wanted to do. And I think now, I think about how I would feel right now if I was in the military as a trans person, because obviously the fact that I'm trans wouldn't have changed if I went into the military, you know?
Yeah.
For you, like, what was the reason for you wanting to go into the military?
This is a bit long, but I'll keep it simple.
That's okay.
I wanted to go in the military since I was 6. I originally wanted to be a fighter pilot because I was in kindergarten and, playing with these airplanes, and it's like, wow, yeah, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to be. I want to be a fighter pilot. And it kind of just turned out that both my parents had both tried to go into the Air Force, my mother and father, and for different reasons were both unable to get in, but both of them wanted to be fighter pilots. So if my mom hadn't had her health issue, she could have been one of the first women allowed to be a fighter pilot in the Air Force. Could have. But
Awesome.
anyway, so I had that in mind right up until my preteen, early teen years, when I found out that, they don't take people with glasses to be fighter pilots. Tough luck.
Oh, wow.
So then I'm like, all right, you know what? I'll do another thing that involves flying. My older brother, he was going in the Army to be a helicopter pilot. He was going to fly Apaches. All right, I want to do that now. That's pretty cool. And then when I get into high school and I'm in JROTC and I'm starting to look into, okay, what do they require me to do in order to get into the MOS, or military occupation specialty, your job for people listening. And I found out that once again, my eyes kind of screwed me. So then I was just kind of left like, great, what do I want to do now? Okay, well, I want to be combat arms, but I also don't want to be infantry because that job just seems just not a good fit for me.
Yeah.
I'd rather be riding around in something. So I'm like, all right, tanks. I'm gonna be a tank crewman. And so that's what I signed up to do. I was signed up to drive tanks, and I did not wind up driving tanks anyway. So yeah, right from age 6 on up into my 20s, I thought I was gonna be career military.
What made you not be?
The other 80 to 90% of the reality of being in the military, they don't tell you until you don't find out until you're actually in and living it.
Yeah, talk about that.
All right, so 10 to 15% of the job I absolutely loved.
That's not very much.
Yeah, now you're starting to get the idea. Like that 10%, that 10 to 15%, maybe 20 on a good day, is stuff like doing your actual MOS related job, the interesting stuff. Like actually going to live fire ranges, being able to just tear across training areas in your tank, or in my case, a Stryker, zooming along. You got so many tens of tons underneath your feet. I mean, that's the stuff you sign up for.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's the other 90% that's like admin stuff, like dog and pony show, where basically everything is about looks rather than function when you're in garrison. Having to do all sorts of things that are just utterly utterly irrelevant to actually being proficient at your tasks, at what you're supposed to be doing, your soldier skills, your MOS specific skills. And these are just things that have always been a factor of military life. Just hurry up and wait. All sorts of complications that just make things unfun. But and then obviously there's the stress from having to do various things. It's a stressful life, and since I was combat arms, it was a bit more stressful than the average. So after my first few years in, I decided I didn't sign up for all of this, at least not knowing it.
Yeah.
And that's before we get into what happened to me on deployment, me getting PTSD, me being reassigned to a unit that was just legendary for being a morale black hole.
Oh.
And yeah.
Yeah, that's not good. So you were deployed,
Mhm.
and so I guess that's what I get back to with why anybody would ban anybody going into the military. I mean, you were deployed from your family in a country you had never been in, that was in the middle of a war, that ultimately broke you to a point as a person to get PTSD. If anybody's willing to go through that, I think we shouldn't let them. If that's what they want to do and go fight for their country, then I don't think we should ban anybody from doing that, because not everybody is willing to give up because in all essence of reality, you're giving up your freedom for that period of time to not be able to do everything you want to do.
Mhm. Yeah, and I have heard the arguments up and down as to why it just makes sense to exclude us from that. I've heard these arguments for years, and I've debunked most of them just left and right. And the usual argument starts off with, "Oh, well, they have a medical issue. What if they can't get medical supplies to them? They're a liability if they don't have regular medical access, and supplies aren't always perfect when you're deployed." Motherfucker, do you know what the United States Army is awesome at? Like, we are an absolute monster at logistics. That is the thing the U.S. Army is the best at. We know how to stay supplied.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was pretty close friends with a senior medic, the medic who was in charge of the medics for the company I deployed with, and I got to see all the stuff they expected him to take care of. And they come supplied with everything. Like, even birth control stuff.
Wow.
And yeah, so the United States Army does not deploy somewhere without bringing a whole lot of stuff with it. So that argument's just false. And then there's the fact that HRT, if you do manage to get a hiccup in supply, like let's say, okay, me being a trans woman, let's say I'm cut off from getting my Spiro and estradiol for a month. I will still be able to perform my job well enough.
Yeah.
I could get by for a few months if I had to. I wouldn't want it.
Yeah.
But I could suck it up.
So it's interesting you talk about that, because one of the things that Trump says why he doesn't think that they should be is due to all the medical costs, which I found it interesting, because if you look at the stats, the cis men in the military spend more money on Viagra than they would spend on people's hormones, surgeries, anything like that. So how he can sit there and say that it's due to medical, and even if so, even if it was more money, how are you going to deny somebody medical care?
Then we get into the other argument that gets peddled a lot, which is, well, the military should only be taking the best of the best, period. A lot of people get excluded because of medical reasons, so that's not being unfairly discriminatory. That's just meeting the needs of the military.
Yeah.
And it's like, are you serious? I would have performed better on my 15 months in Iraq if I had been on HRT the whole time and allowed to basically be who I am, assuming I knew enough to do that. You know what
Of
I mean?
course, yeah.
So, I mean, that argument itself is dumb, but it relies on the whole like we are the elite angle of it. So, and it's dumb, especially when you realize that the vast majority of jobs in the military do not require someone being in like peak physical condition at all times. They do not require having perfect health, like with no flaws whatsoever.
Yeah.
No, like a tiny vanishing percentage of the military is actually even combat arms at all. Only like I think it was like 1% of the military is actually the people who are kicking in doors and shooting things and breaking things. Only 1%. The vast majority of the military is support. They stay on the fob, they make sure people get fed, get supplied with other things, make sure the fuel's available, ammunition, etc. All the boring but very important stuff.
Yeah.
So, and you get people acting like everyone's supposed to be special forces or something, being caught behind enemy lines all the time. It's absurd.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is. So one of the things that came out after it went into effect on the 12th of April was because the media has defined it as a ban, but the Department of Defense has come out to say that it's not a ban. I mean, I don't know how they can sit and say it's not a ban when you're banning a certain population of the country. What they can't give a determination as to what it is. They have not stated that, at least not to my knowledge. But what is your view on the fact that the media and everybody else says that it's a ban, and the Department of Defense is saying it's not?
Oh boy, they are lying through their teeth. I've basically been calling it "Don't ask, don't transition,"
Well, that's a good one.
because that's effectively what it is. It's like, oh well, for the time right now, we're allowing people who've already said they're trans to stay in, but only if they don't transition, and they serve only in their assigned gender.
Okay.
So that's the game they're playing.
Yeah.
But the thing is, though, is that the secretaries of each service, so Army, Navy, Air Force, have already been issued orders from Secretary of Defense or Trump, either way, to draw up their own service-specific regs for excluding future trans applicants.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're making it instead of doing it as a top-down DoD policy, they're diluting it so that each service has their own specific reg for it.
Interesting.
Which is what they do for a lot of things, but they're doing it. It's very obviously they're doing it deliberately in this case, just to avoid saying it's a ban.
Yeah.
And it's just so it's transparent to anyone who's been in the military, because we get used to looking at how regs actually work in practice.
So it's my understanding that if they're currently under care and they've been diagnosed with gender dysphoria, they can continue to serve in the military. Is that right or wrong?
Well, I don't have it right in front of me,
Yeah.
but as far as I know, they're only doing that so they can avoid the headache of having to kick too many out. But the problem, though, is that Ugh, I really should have prepared better.
All
Uh,
right.
all right. So, but if I remember correctly, they're basically going to boot anyone who's had the surgeries.
Oh, what? I mean,
But
so that okay. That just doesn't
so yeah,
make sense to me.
it's a complicated little game they're playing.
So when you sign up to go into the military, so for example, I've transitioned. I have not had bottom surgery, but it's just say that I had completely transitioned and I had bottom surgery. And obviously, my name's changed, my birth certificate's changed, everything like that. If
Right.
I wanted to go into the military, would there be any way for them to find out that I had been born a female?
Yes, because whenever you try to enlist, you have to submit a very extensive medical history.
Oh, okay.
Like basically, when you go through, it's called MEPS, Military Entry Processing System,
Mm-hmm.
I think. What they do is they basically have a large amount of it involve you having to provide so much documentation to show that you do not have a criminal record that they have to care about, that you are a US citizen, that you do not have X, Y, or Z medical issues, and they actually examine you like give you a medical exam to check for what they would list as being disqualifying conditions. So you really don't get to pull anything up by them.
Wow.
No secrets.
Okay. I was gonna say because I mean, I otherwise how would they tell? You know, because I mean, if you had done A through Z and transition completely, then. But now that makes sense.
Yeah, like at MEPS, you have to drop trow and a nurse examines your junk.
Oh, wonderful.
It's fun. hmm In processing is not a fun task.
No, that would not be. Especially if you're trans and you're not okay with your body.
hmm
So currently, there's 4 active lawsuits that are pending to overturn the ban.
Music to my ears.
Do you think that any or some or all of them or none of them will get go through?
Hmm. Well, I'm not a lawyer, but my guess is it may not actually even matter if either of those lawsuits actually gets it overturned for a simple reason. We're running the clock.
Yeah.
Like Trump and the other and the Republicans, they know they're screwed in 2020. So basically, we just have to run the clock until 2020, and then when whoever beats him takes office, and when the Dems basically take over Congress in full in January 2021, all of the dumb stuff that the previous administration and previous Congress put into action will get over. It's just going to get overturned as a matter of course anyway.
Yeah. Well, like I read an article today that the stats I think from January that said that 70% of the people that they asked in the United States said that they should be allowed to serve in the military. I mean, that's almost 3/4 of the country.
That
And
is very, very nice to hear.
yeah.
That's some people I don't think can realize just how massive a change that is from just 5 years ago,
Oh, I know.
much less 10. It's amazing.
Huge. I mean, of course, they broke it down into Democrat and Republicans, and of course, Democrats were higher than Republicans. But just and I also read a stat today that was interesting, that the amount of people that just the average cisgendered person in this country today, went like actually knowing somebody that's trans went from 11% in 2011 to 21% in 2016.
Woo! Wow.
Yeah.
That
So
is.
I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that people are starting to be okay with being out,
Mhm.
and allowing themselves to, be themselves and not be afraid to necessarily say, hey, I'm trans. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't walk around with, the trans flag on my forehead saying, yeah, I'm trans. If I feel like I can have that conversation with somebody, I will certainly have that conversation and educate them. But I'm not one that wears the, to let everybody know I'm trans all the time. I just don't do that. But I'm more than happy to be visible for those who can't be, and I'm choosing to do that, obviously. But um, I I think people are allowing themselves to be out when they couldn't before. So it's not that these people didn't know trans people prior. The person just didn't allow themselves to let them know. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm. Yeah, I'm definitely in the same boat as you are then. Like, I mean, I go out and about, and it's not like I'm trying to say, "Hey, I'm trans to everyone," but if someone, if it's relevant for me to say, then yeah, I will make it known, "Yes, I'm trans, and ask me whatever you need to."
Yeah,
Because I know some people, they can't. They have their personal reasons why they can't. And I feel like those of us who can should,
I agree.
for the people who can't.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, because there are a lot of people that still can't.
Yep, too many.
Yeah.
It's a shame, but we're getting better.
Yeah. So, um, what? How do you compare? So Clinton put the "Don't Ask, Don't Tell" policy into effect in 1994.
Hmm.
How do you think that policy and this ban are similar?
They certainly have some commonality because both are predicated on the idea of we're not going to do witch hunts. So a witch hunt basically in DADT days was if a commander suspected one of their subordinates was gay, they could basically investigate intrusively. And in the military, that can be very intrusive, especially if you live in the barracks with other service members,
Yeah.
because they have an incentive to report someone because, homophobia. So what DADT did was get rid of that. So there could be no gay witch hunts, but at the same time, if a gay person was caught red-handed, then they were done. And so this helped. It was an improvement compared to what it was before, but it still meant a lot of gay service members were just closeted, living, and some of them living completely different lives on post and off post. And so you're kind of winding up with a similar situation here in that there won't be any trans witch hunts per se, but if they get found out, if they try to do anything that might come up on a blood test, perhaps like take HRT on the sly or anything else like that, they run the risk of getting separated from the service. And it's having that kind of sword of Damocles over your head is not a good feel.
Yeah. Have you seen the movie A Soldier's Girl?
I've heard of it, I have not seen it
Oh,
yet.
you have to see it. It's a movie. It's been out for several years, but it's a military movie, and it's about a man that falls in love with a trans woman.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's depicted during the height of the "Don't Ask, Don't Tell" policy. And not to give it all away, but basically one of his bunkmates took him to this gay club where he met this trans woman, and then proceeded to tell their sergeants and things like that that there was somebody in their unit that was homosexual. And it's a really good movie. It's actually based on a true story.
Yep. It was a soldier from the 101st, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and it makes me cry every time that I watch it because it's so incredibly sad. But for those who have not seen it that are listening and you want to watch a good movie, you should check out Soldier's Girl. But I think of that and how that the stuff, I mean, to think that in 1994, I mean, that's over 20 years ago, 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And we're still bad. I mean, maybe not the exact same thing, but just another part of the LGBT community that is battling something, in the military and keeping us hiding in the closet. I mean, it's essentially it's no different. I mean, the gays were hiding in the closet, and trans people are hiding in the closet from transitioning to keep their jobs. I mean, I forget what the percentage was, but the military employs the most transgender people. So
Yep. Trans people are twice as likely to have served than cis people.
yeah. So I mean, think about the amount of people that they won't have in the military that would have gone into the military, but you're keeping them from. So what your recruitment rates are going to go down, and what are you going to do? Eventually do another call to action for everybody to join. I think it's bogus. I think it's bullshit.
Yeah. I mean, they're not really hurting for people at the moment, but there's a critical issue that most Americans just do not even realize that about the nature of military service, which is it very often is a way for someone who's disadvantaged to actually get a better life. It's been a way out of poverty for a lot of people. And
True.
so they're going to be losing a lot of people who would already be extremely motivated to do the job. And there was this whole thing, this argument in the years leading up to Obama letting trans people serve openly about how, oh, well, there's going to be a run on the enlistment offices of all these trans people who want to get all their free transitions. It'll cost us so much money and it'll be so horrible. It's like, first off, no. I mean, you already covered it. The cost would be negligible.
Yeah.
It's a drop in the bucket. But the other thing is, can you imagine someone who's going to be more dedicated to the mission than someone whose transition is riding on them finishing their contract?
That's true.
It's like,
that's
dude.
very true. I mean, considering I paid for the one surgery I had out of pocket and still paying on it today. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think they'd give up. That's for sure. It's very frustrating for me. I've always been a very passionate person and advocate for the LGBT community, but I think it got amplified by when I came out as trans, because not only was I marginalized prior to transitioning as a lesbian, is how I identified at the time, but I became an even more marginalized community. And the interesting thing is that when people look at me, they see me as a cis white man. So I realize that I have a lot of privilege. But in all reality, people see me that way, but I'm really a marginalized community because I'm trans. But my goal starting this podcast was so that people could get educated on the topic. And of course, everybody and anybody wants to stamp out ignorance. And of course, I'd like to do that. But um, a lot of it has to start with the top and who we elect into office.
I'd
And
agree.
I mean, I was going to ask you that question anyway, but you already told me that you think that Trump's going to be out of office in 2020. So, and I agree.
Yep.
I think he does have his followers, and I think there are very many of them. But I think people are sick and tired of his felonious bullshit. To be honest, and
Although I do want to say one thing for all the people listening. There was a thing that was told to us, told to soldiers like me when I was in, the whole time I was in. You hear it all the time. You hear them say, complacency kills. Complacency kills. Never get complacent. You could get yourself or your buddy killed because you got complacent. That's the same thing here. We got complacent. That's how we got Trump. So everyone needs to be going to the polls in 2020. Assume nothing.
that's true.
Complacency kills, folks.
Yeah, that's true. So, say just your general person, I mean, regardless if they're cis, trans, black, white, yellow, purple, what do you think, other than going to vote? Because obviously I think that's number one. I think regardless of who you're going to vote for, you should vote because it's something that we fought for the right to have. So, I think, and it's your duty as a person to go out and vote. But other than that, what do you think people should do as far as wanting to help fight the ban?
That's a big question. Well, as it is, it is it's a directive to the DoD, if I remember correctly. So it's not something that's going through the legislative process, which means it's not like a senator or representative can really stop it, but it never hurts to call your senator and representative to say, hey, this is screwed up. You need to oppose it. If you already are, be louder about it. You know, there's that. And then there's also, if you're able to, maybe donate to organizations who are trying to fight this on a legal level. So, because they can't work for free. They have to pay for expenses to do the good stuff.
Very true. Very true. Yeah. And there are a lot of great organizations that are working to fight this, as well as fight, for trans to be visible and a lot of other things. This isn't just the only thing, but that's a great suggestion. Well, I have one last question for you.
Right?
For those active military personnel out there, or the people that are trans and want to serve in the military, what advice, as a retired ex-Army sergeant, would you have for them? I mean, I can say all I want to say, but I wasn't in the military. So considering you were in the military and you're trans, even though you didn't transition in the military, what advice do you have for them right now? Or words of wisdom?
Well, I was never in their exact shoes, so I don't want to presume to know what I may not. But as a soldier, I would say, for those who are supportive of you, the people to your left and your right, your brothers and sisters, lean on them. You watch they're supposed to be watching your back. That's how it goes. You're supposed to be family. And if worse comes to worse and you get separated, just remember, the Blue Falcons in DC, they're going out soon, and you'll be able to get back in once they're gone. This ain't permanent. This is temporary. It's a shitty temporary, but it is temporary. Stay frosty. And Charlie Mike.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for today. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Transcaster Radio, and don't forget to tune in every Tuesday at 10 a.m. for another great episode. Until next time, love life, live authentically, and as always, rise up.
Thank you for listening to Transcaster Radio. Be sure to visit transcasterradio.com to access the show notes and discover awesome bonus content.